So, hey guys, welcome. Thank you for joining me on this interview. For those of you joining us or watching the video after it's posted, thank you for joining us. This is one of our Worldsmiths segments, and today we have Scott Colby, who is the author of The Black Yonnix, A Bitter End, one of the novels in the Pileaus world, and we have Caleb Summers, who is the narrator for the new audiobook of that title. We are going to be talking a little bit about world building. That's what this segment is for. And the reason why that's really important to Outland is because one of our core values is to develop transmedia worlds, which is more than multimedia. It's taking a story that's based in a world and then expanding upon that world in different types of media. So one of our largest ones is Viking Verse by Ian Stewart Sharp. And it started with a couple of novels, and now we have 4 comics, and we have a phrase book that's kind of imagining if Old Norse was still in today's language. And then we have more things on the way with that world. With Pileaus, we have 2 novels currently, and in a week or 2, we will have an anthology of short stories, which I got to edit, and it was really great. So I'm really excited for that to come out. But Scott is what we call kind of a steward of the Pileaus world. He didn't create it, but he is the one that's kind of in charge of it now. Outland has acquired it. Scott has willingly taken it on, and we appreciate that, although it might have gone the other way around. And if it did, then I can edit that out, Scott. So we're going to talk to Scott a little bit about world building and then welcoming other creators into that world. And then we're going to talk about talk to Caleb about working with worldsmiths, world builders, and how he can help them build the world, even though the world's already built and he's narrating the words. He could still contribute to building that world, especially for new audiences. So let's see. First, let's talk to Scott. Do you want to just give us a general introduction to who you are, what you do, that sort of thing?
Sure. I'm Scott Colby. I'm an editor with Pileaus. I am in charge of, I'm an editor with Outland. I'm in charge of the Pileaus project. I also have my own series of fantasy novels run through through Outland called Deviant Magic. I think we're up to 3 books published in that one so far, with a 4th on the way very soon.
Yeah. Okay. And then Caleb, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Great, thank you so much. My name is Caleb Summers. I am an audiobook narrator. I specialize in children's, young adult, and sci-fi fantasy fiction. It was my pleasure to get to be a part of the Pileaus world by bringing voice to the Black Yonnix, A Bitter End. And I've been narrating audiobooks for about a year, and I'm thrilled about being able to work with Outland and the amazing group of creatives that they have running that organization.
Great, thank you. And Outland only has, I believe, 2 other audiobooks at this time. Just recently the last 6 months or so, we've been really focusing on producing more audiobooks. So we're excited to be able to bring narrators into our family, our Outland family, which is a great family. Once you get to know us, then you kind of just want to hang out a lot. At least that's my experience, and I think Scott shares that too. So welcome, we're excited to have you, and we're excited to have narrators. Scott, will you go ahead? Now, I mentioned before that Pileaus is one of our worlds of transmedia, and we acquired it a while ago, and we have been building off of it, and you've kind of been the steward for that. Will you go ahead and just kind of give us a little bit of history and describe the world of Pileaus?
Sure. So the world of Pileaus is huge, right? So it's this kind of dual realm situation where you've got a world full of mortals doing, all kinds of happy mortal things. And then you've got this parallel, super crazy, super strange dimension with the immortal Fae, who are kind of always watching over things and endlessly debating what the fate of the mortals should be. We have all kinds of political intrigue happening as well. So we've got an area up in the north that is basically being swallowed up by an empire, and there's a lot of war and strife happening all around that. And then down in the south, we've got some newer nations that are kind of trying to find their place in the world. And in between, we have this crazy, untamed wild full of ruins of a lost civilization. So there are literally zillions of stories that we could tell within this world. And it's super fun and a great opportunity to get a lot of different voices and a lot of different perspectives involved in terms of the writing and the world building.
And that's one of the things I really enjoyed about editing Symphony #1, the anthology that's coming out, is that every story was so different, in part because it felt like, not that it was in a different world, because it definitely felt consistent from story to story, but there were just so many different perspectives, so many different even like races that were incorporated into there, and each one of them had their own culture and their own history and their own motivations, and it was really interesting to see the variety that was in there. So I'm excited to see how the world continues to expand. So as a steward for this world, you are bringing on writers. We've been working on Symphony really for quite a while, but you've brought on some new writers. Tell us a little bit about how you approach working with people creating within the Pileaus world.
Sure. So that is one of the most fun parts of the gig, right? Is like showing this world to these new people who have not seen it before and have different experiences and different perspectives than I have. And they come in and they try to find something that fits them and what they want to do in their style. So it can be intimidating because the world it's huge. I don't know if either one of you have ever seen the resource guide, but the thing is a good like 380 some odd pages.
Wow.
And it is dense, it's crazy. There is so much in there that we still haven't really touched. We have struggled for years to try to find a good way to condense it and like communicate it and get it across. So kind of the best way that I have found to onboard new writers is find out what they're interested in, right? Like what kind of story do they want to write? And I always make sure that I have a list of potential Pileaus stories kind of like hanging out so I can match what the writers might want to do to what's in the world. Because if we give this Bible essentially to somebody brand new, yeah, good luck. It's super fun to read through. There is so much detail and so much going on. But I think the best way to do it is really just to talk to the writer and find out, again, what they're interested in and where they would like to go.
Great. And then how is working with a narrator different? 'Cause the story is already written.
Yeah, it was super interesting to get Caleb's take on it, because that's a whole other kind of like introducing someone to the world at kind of a different level, right? Because like you said, the story is already written. And there are certain things in my head about it that came off amazingly well, I thought, through the writing. Like Caleb started talking about things and it was just like, oh, he got that entirely. This is great. This is fun. And it also, it had been a while since I had such an in-depth conversation about the world with anybody. So like hearing from Caleb and hearing how excited he was and how interested he was in everything and how much he wants to learn about it all was like just amazing.
That's great, because I'm sure it would be easy as a narrator to just pick it up and read it and not really know or care and be fine. But to have someone who's really interested in the story and working with the author I think that's incredible. And Caleb, I commend you for that. So Caleb, you said that you've been doing this about a year, and you've narrated, I think you said 10 books in a variety of genre. How do you approach world building in your narration?
Well, like you said, building a world from an already existing script is a little bit easier because, well, the story's already there. having the chance to speak with Scott, to ask him questions about the world and about the different inhabitants and different races of the world gave me a whole other perspective on it. But I think that really with a book like the Black Yonnix, and in a world like Pileaus that has so much depth and has been so brilliantly created, it was really about allowing the world to sort of speak through me. You know, I really enjoyed it, delving into it, doing my first read of the book. I think I did in like 2 days time or something, just because I really enjoyed it. And that inspiration just allowed that world to just speak for itself, using me as a conduit. And so I think that the process of smithing, as you say, is for me as a performer, because that's really what I'm doing here, is I'm performing the words that are on the page. It's a process of tapping into that world and letting it out by the use of my voice, sort of taking a step back and giving that world the microphone and just letting it use me as a loudspeaker to bring itself out into the world.
So I notice, you know, I mean, I know there are different tips and tricks that narrators use, and it's probably been a while since you actually narrated Pileaus, since it's out now. I'm assuming it's been a while since you actually narrated it. But is there anything that comes to mind, whether it was with Pileaus or just in general, that you try to remember, or you are very intentional about, whether like when you're reading it, or, you know, like, I don't know, any things that you do to make sure that you're conveying the story the way that it needs to be conveyed?
That's a good question. And certainly there are ways in which there are certain characters for whom I'll write notes to myself and remind myself that, you know, this happens in the future, or that, you know, don't forget that they have this sort of quality of character. And also, I mean, and every narrator does it differently in my experience and in the conversations I've had. For me, it's a process of really visualizing. I get a really clear picture in my head of who this character is, and I can imagine them saying the words that are written on the page, and then just do my best to impersonate them. It's more me trying to emulate the characters than me trying to create them in some way. And you know, I've heard authors say that you know, instead of writing characters, they keep track of what the characters are doing, whether or not it's what they had intended them to do or wanted them to do, or whatever. And as a narrator, I very much can relate to that, because I feel like I'm just, again, letting these characters speak through me. So certainly for me, it's a visual practice. For others, there's definitely, you know, they imagine celebrities that a certain character should sound like, or a best friend, or a teacher, or a paternal figure, or something like that. And but everybody has a different way of doing that. Everybody has their own access to the voices and to the personalities inside the story, and then they're all effective as long as they, you know, remain consistent and can be conveyed and, you know, and differentiated from each other.
That's really interesting. So I do community theater, and creating the characters is really, it's a different type, like you're saying, like it's a different type of experience. It's because it's not making it up from scratch. It's already an established character, but then there's also like you trying to be a conduit for that character. So actually, I guess it could be kind of like possession or something. Okay, so in other conversations that you and I have had, you had talked about how the way that Scott presented the Pileaus world to you was interesting. Like it was intriguing. You read the book, but in conversations with Scott, how did he present Pileaus to you? What methods did he use presenting Pileaus to you that were helpful to you?
So I read the Black Yonnix having no background in Pileaus. I didn't know any of the backstory, hadn't encountered any of the other stories. And so I read it and it felt sort of like, and I think I may have even said this to you, Scott, that it felt like I was coming in halfway through. Like I'd stepped in at intermission and was witnessing the second act. Mm-hmm. And what Scott, and so Scott, he sort of leaned back in his chair and he went, well, I mean, we were on the phone, so I couldn't actually see him, but that's what it sounded like he did. And he started giving me the backstory. And, not only the backstory of, well, here's how Pileaus was created. Here's was this creative brainchild of these people, and then it passed through this hands into this hands and was co-generated by this team, but then also the history of the world itself, where how this dual universe sort of came about and some of the evolution of it, and really gave me the context of what I was reading. And I'll say more than anything, what really kind of blew my mind about it was the way that Pileaus itself is kind of like it's like a living thing. It's like a real universe standing alone by itself that just gets tapped into by these various different creatives who then come back and share their perspective of what happened in Pileaus while they were there. Mm-hmm. While they were encountering this one race, or while they had this experience with the Shuin or with the Masaid or whoever it might be, and brought back their own perspective of it. And that just resounded with me so much, because it is really this collaborative, co-created world that's has just such limitless potential because of the way that it was brought into our world through the stories and minds of some really interesting creative people.
Yeah, that's a really cool way of putting. I mean, my experience with the anthology completely aligns with that. I can't wait till you read the anthology, because it's just more of the same. And it's really cool that even with just your experience with the one novel, like you see the same thing, and with Scott, of course, but you see the same thing that you get to see in the anthology with so many different stories from different perspectives. So I'm excited. I think Pileaus is great. Okay, so Scott, is when working with people who are going to be contributing to this world that is already built, what advice do you have for the world creators themselves in working with, whether it's a narrator like Caleb or other writers or even artists, musicians? I mean, there's all kinds of ways that you can reinterpret your world and create artifacts even from this world. So what advice do you have for those creators who want people to contribute to their world, but also kind of need, some control?
So, the first thing I would say is that they don't be afraid of new and different voices, number one, right? Because you're going to get your best work out of people when they're doing things kind of the way they want to do them. The other piece of advice that I would give is to try to help them stay focused, right? Like with World with Pileaus, it is so huge. It's huge. And I lost track of the number of creators who wanted to just like dive in and take a character from every race and throw them in the Empire and send them off to kill the Emperor. And then the Fae show up, and then this, and then that, and then this. And I think that we really, even with, a novel like The Black Yonnix, I think kind of like keeping it focused, right? Telling a single story within this bigger world can really, really help to define what's going on and like make it feel alive, right? Because in the real world, you don't have that situation like I just mentioned, where you've got everybody showing up to go battle the bad guy, but you have a bunch of smaller conflicts spread throughout. And I think trying to present Pileaus or any other big combined property that way is a very smart way to do it. I kind of like to laugh and joke sometimes that like we were trying to do the Marvel Cinematic Universe before Disney tried to do it. So, telling all those separate stories and letting them combine into a bigger story, I think is a very smart and clearly engaging way to go.
Yeah. So basically what I'm hearing you say is don't limit and also limit.
Yes. Yeah. Right. It's you're walking a tightrope, really, right? Because you have rules within the world, but I think there's always room for a lot of experimentation and such. Mm-hmm. When you keep things kind of focused, because then you've got that basic framework for a creator to really lend their voice to it.
Okay, great, thank you. And then Caleb, what is your advice, the opposite side of it, as an artist contributing to somebody else's creation? What is your advice for approaching working in somebody else's world?
My advice is to ask questions, to go to find the resources you have and ask them and present ideas. Ask them what you think. Ask for those kinds of limitations. Ask for boundaries. Say, or present ideas. Like I think I suggested to Scott that, I kind of want to give this character this kind of accent. And Scott said, oh, that sounds really interesting, but in Pileaus, there isn't really I can't really attribute that character a location that would warrant its own specialized accent. So maybe we'll just give him, just keep him to his own unique character that shares an accent and a dialogue or dialect with the rest of the characters. And I said, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. And it gave me the opportunity to create a unique character out of one that I kind of wanted to just distinguish a certain way, but then got the opportunity to do in another. So my advice is to ask, to communicate, to really, find the resources that are available and use them, because otherwise, we all spend enough time in our own little silos, imagining what's going on, living by our own little narratives. It's the more communication, I think, the better in all kinds of ways.
Great, thank you. Yeah, that's cool. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me on this interview. This has been a really cool perspective on building worlds and working with artists. So I appreciate you both taking the time out to do this. We want our viewers to be able to find you. So if you would give us your website, social media, all of that, so that they know where the best place to find you is and find out more about you. Scott, do you want to go first?
Sure. The best place to find me on social media is on Twitter. I'm at Colby Knows Best. That's Colby with a C. And then I have a website, deviantmagic.com, where you can see all of my writing.
Great. Thanks. And Caleb?
Thanks so much, Tara. The best way to find me is on social media through Facebook at facebook.com/Caleb Reads. Or come see me on my website at calebsummers.com, where you can catch samples of my reading, see upcoming releases, and all kinds of other exciting information.
Again, thank you guys so much. I appreciate it. This has been fun. I love the Pileaus world, and I'm excited to see how it grows, and I'm glad that both of you are a part of it. For our audience, thank you for watching. We do have more audiobooks in the works, so keep an eye on that, and keep an eye on all of our Pileaus works and our Deviant Magic books, because they're really great. So thank you guys again, and see you guys later.